In this video, we're going to do one of the internal pages, one of the pages that actually uses our columns as opposed to just ignoring them entirely like our cover page. Here's are those notes from the other day. Here is our text that I'm going to use for this. And it's kind of a waste, but that's because I was using, Google Docs instead of something fancier. So that you can kind of see through there. You can see that each of these will fit just about on these columns. So let's go ahead and do that. Here's our page. If we want to, I could have made another photocopied page of that textured background. But generally I like for text just have cleaner because, I just don't want it to be that much of a, I don't want it to be hard to ever read my stuff. That just seems like a bad idea. I now have my 3 lines of text. I have my first interior page. Remember, this is just the layout of an interior page. We're just kind of picking one of them. This isn't the next page in the book. I just want to do my cover to kind of get an idea of the style that I want for my design. And then I want to do one interior page just to make sure that my layout works at all. So I'm going to set these up. You can see that I'm using the one that I did before where I marked out the interior and exterior edges. I know that this would be the interior facing page on this side, so I know that I would have a left. The left side would be bigger, right? Because I'm going to have hole punches in here. If I didn't have the hole punches, then it could be even. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of look at how this looks. So what I might do, something off like this. Or actually, you know what? I have some interesting cut-ups that I might be able to do. And this goes back to being able to arrange text. Is that this all goes together. This, and then there's 2 examples. And then this, and then there's a whole list of things that we can do. So maybe I actually want those to be separate. Also, one thing to note is I just cut those and one didn't cut all the way through exactly right. And if you need to tear the edges, that's fine. It can give you a really neat little bit of texture in your design that you otherwise would be very hard to get, right? Like there are some things like setting of text that is really difficult using this technique, but there are other things like adding texture that are really simple. It is using it to your advantage. And one thing I'm going to go ahead and do is actually make a pretty hard mark for the inside edge, because I know that that's just really going to be super dangerous of me wanting to put things too close to that. So I'm going to go all the way to the edge and just put a little mark. Now I could do a line if I wanted to, but I can also do one of 2 things. One, I could actually tape this to an object behind it, and that gives me just kind of a visual feel of where that line is. I could also tape an object to the front of it to keep me from putting stuff that close. I'm going to do neither of those things. What I'm going to do is simply look at it, and then if I need to check it, line up my ruler with the top and bottom marks, and that lets me know how close this can be, right? If I go up underneath this and I start losing some of my text, then I know that I'm too close and I can, move it around accordingly. So that looks good right there. I'm not going to tape it down entirely, but I am just going to get the tiniest bit of tape for the top corner. with this. I think I want to put this maybe like that. And then one thing we can also do is, everything I've been using so far is square, but you can also take interesting textures, fold them, and you might get something that looks neat, you know, scanned through. I also don't have to use this as a square, right? I could cut a shape and fit it to that area. I could also use a little bit of art or texture. So maybe these little dudes in the back, I could use them. I don't really think I want to for this, but it would be a decent option. Actually, that middle bit of art is kind of interesting. But I think it's going to be too much, and I think it's going to be too aggressive. So this is a scan of that box that I had yesterday. One of these, last video, in this box. I just scanned that. Now let's see if that might be more interesting than this, because this looks good. I kind of like the way that this is laid out, but I just visually don't find it that exciting. So I'm going to gently pull up the tape. That's one of the nice things about Scotch tape, is it will pull up pretty safely. I can now check my 3/4 of an inch here. So now I can do something that looks like that. I have this big negative space in the middle, which I'm not really a huge fan of. What I might do is find some other piece of art. Oh, I know what we can use. What about something like that? Or, because these two example texts that are here go with this one here, maybe a little bit of white. Now that's where I need those stripes that I probably just threw away. Maybe a little bit of white behind to hold it together. And if you notice, I keep reaching out and getting a little sharp thing to grab the pieces of paper. And that's just because it's very dry right now and my hands are relatively dry. And that makes it very hard to pick up individual pieces. A little bit of lotion for this would probably actually go a long way to being able to grab individual pieces of very thin paper. Or, you know, just better paper. And I think this does need a little bit of something else. And you know what that thing is that we totally forgot about? Is page number. And page number 1. So one thing here is I've got a little bit of art, I've got some texture, I've got my text, and I've got some handwritten stuff. So those are going to be the elements that I kind of use throughout this. And those are the elements I use in the cover, right? I used some art that I found. I used some texture for the background. I used some text that I've printed. And then I used some handwritten components as well. So it's a very good kind of way to think about it, is what elements did I use, and make sure you use those pretty regularly. Alright, so let's go ahead and paste this up. And by paste up, I of course mean Scotch tape. One thing we gotta do is check this. Alright, so I have my reasonably good paste up going on there. Page 1. I have my text that I'm going to use. I have this little bit of art. I just folded over a piece of paper just to give myself some texture there in the middle. I might do something the same. I could also use something sharp, because this is, again, this is toner. So I can start shaving off some of that texture. And of course realize, like right there, there's Scotch tape, so my line is going to start, you know, once the Scotch tape ends. So I need to be a little bit cautious about that. I can also, you know, do bigger swashes, because toner really just doesn't stick that well. I can also do that actually on top of textures. So like, just have this on my desk. It's those little chains you use to do the light fixtures. Well, you can do that, and you can get that little bit of, you know, the texture from those objects. What about something like a keyring? Well, we're essentially doing like the rubbings, except we're just doing it in reverse. Look at that. You can get that neat ring texture, and then we can just move the whole page and do it again. So we can get some interesting background texture. Let's see, where's that tape? Is right there. The ring right there. We can get some interesting things going on our page to keep it from looking quite so neutral. We can fade whole sections. Actually, I really want to bring this fade up a little bit. Little bits like this little edge of this piece of paper right here, it's fine. It just adds visual interest. We don't really need to get rid of that. I could also do stuff like that and take that corner. But then what I need to do is say, okay, well, why have I taken that corner? And I'm going to say that the reason I took that corner is because that is the end of that section, which means that now at every point where I have the end of a section, I need to tip the corner like that. So I'm going to do it there, and then I'm going to do it right here as well. But now I have the trouble that there's some tape here, but that's okay, because we can just cut that out. So now I have another visual style, so I might want to write that down in my notes, that at the end of each section I put a little, you know, corner cut that looks to be I don't know, about 8 millimeters. So yeah, so we can do that. I'm gonna lighten up this little dark spot a little bit. There we go, same with this one. Alright, that looks pretty good. Might bring this line over. And then if we wanted to, we could do other things in this. So if I wanted to do the, let's see, like we could write in this. I could do a BYO up here. But the problem with any text that close is what? Right, I'm inside my half-inch margin. So I want to make sure that I'm keeping all the content that needs to be right inside those margins. If I just have like junk on the edges, totally fine. Don't worry about it at all. Alright, let's see what this looks like scanned. That, again, is our original. And that is our scan. This one's much, much closer than the last one. These two look very similar. This is a little bit washed out though. I've gotten a little bit more of that texture, and I kind of like this. I also have a little bit of these hard edge lines where I have high contrast changes. But my text, this is something that's really, really important when we're doing this, because it does degrade the image. I need to just read through this real quick and just make sure that my text looks right. And my text does look right, and I like that very, very much. So I think that this is going to be just fine as a page in our document. So I actually stopped the video and came back because I had a realization that when I looked at this, I couldn't see where sections started. Right? I have the endings, I have this little corner cut thing, which works well for the endings, but these headlines didn't attract me at all. So now I have to think about, well, how am I going to make those more interesting? And I think that we could just do something real simple, right? I could use black, which might actually be the right choice, but let's go get that marker we were using. Anytime you can use the same marker or the same idea, go ahead and do it. This is our original one, right? This is the one that's actually pasted up. I don't know if you can see this. Yep, there you go. Stuff falling off of it. So what we can do is for section headers, well, I can just write on it. What do we think? Maybe an arrow? think an arrow would be good. Let's see, does that arrow look good? Does that give us ideas of where we're going to do things? We could even just, like, you know, draw stuff into this. So if I wanted something to be a little bit darker, I could totally do that. Easy to do. But I think that that is just enough. I want a little bit heavier up here. And if I want it to be heavier, right, I just get a darker marker. I like that gray marker just because it gives me a little bit of variation. But I could easily come back with a Sharpie and give myself a really harsh center line on each of those and darken them up. Because now I have an idea of what I'm doing on this page, right? I have an idea that this is the thing that I'm doing. And I could underline it. And I could have this very nice hand-made feel to this without really doing that much more work, right? Like that wasn't that much, but it's going to look so much cooler. And let's give ourselves a scan of that. So there's our scan, and there's our original. Now we can look at our two side to side. This was the original one, this was the original scan that I didn't really like because it didn't tell me where to start reading. This one, oh, so much better. I know exactly what I'm supposed to be looking at, and I kind of know what's important on the page and what's secondary on the page, right? The important things are these three very high contrast. That's an important thing too, that we have to manage our contrast, right? I've used this scratch method to decontrast most of the page, to remove the contrast. So when I add in contrast, it's aggressive, it's right there, and I don't have to think twice. I know where I'm supposed to look because those are the highest contrast things on the page.